Hello, everyone. My name is Magenta. I am a polyamory relationship coach and educator. Thank you so much for being here. This video contains a lot of generally useful information about polyamory, but it is particularly aimed at folks in monogamous relationships who are either thinking of opening up or who are in the middle of that process. Clearly, we are not going to hit all of the important stuff in this video, but I am hoping that this can serve as a solid foundation. We're going to talk a lot about some of the philosophies and frameworks of polyamory, as well as introducing some practical tools and considerations that can help you make this transition in a loving, sustainable, healthy way. Polyamory is wonderful and worth the effort, but it can be hard, particularly at the beginning. My hope is that after watching this video, you feel empowered, informed, and more prepared. I want to help you explore polyamory and move through this process in a way that continues to celebrate and support your existing partnership, while also opening up to the truly lovely possibilities of polyamory and ethical non-monogamy. You may have heard the terms polyamory and ethical non-monogamy used somewhat interchangeably. ENM is an umbrella term for any ethically non-monogamous dynamic. The ethical part is paramount. So it is not about cheating or coercion, dishonesty, manipulation. Ethical non-monogamy requires that everyone involved is fully informed and freely consenting. There are a lot of different ways that ENM can look, all the way from hookups and hall passes to group marriage. Polyamory is a subset of ethical non-monogamy that focuses on emotional openness as well as the physical. Polyamory is predicated on the idea that sexual and romantic exclusivity are not necessarily necessary in deep, meaningful, loving relationships. That it is absolutely possible to have multiple healthy, long-term, joyful, romantic partnerships. Again, there are so many different ways these dynamics can work. There is no one true way to poly. The important part is that people are fully informed, freely consenting, and that the dynamic is actively good for everyone involved. I want to take a moment to specifically talk to the folks out there who are feeling a little threatened and maybe backed into a corner by polyamory. Maybe they've just fallen in love with a poly person, or maybe they've been in a beautiful monogamous relationship for a long time and their partners have just announced to them that suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, they are actually polyamorous and the whole landscape of their relationship has to shift right now. Maybe they've already got somebody in mind and holy hell, what are you supposed to do with that information? Being polybombed sucks. It's rough. Even when it's not so dire as that, having one's beloved even bring up the topic, even just as a hypothetical, can throw people for a loop. Before we go any further in this video, the most important thing for you to remember that no matter what side of the equation you're on, you have agency in this. You are not obligated to take part in a relationship dynamic that hurts you. That's part of the point of polyamory. We are all fully autonomous, capable adults who should have the right to pursue healthy, fulfilling relationships. Your boundaries matter. Your happiness matters. So does your partner's. So no one gets to push another person into a dynamic that is bad for them. If you ultimately know deep down that this absolutely isn't going to work for you or is absolutely mandatory for you, that is fine. Polyamory is not more morally or philosophically or ethically better than monogamy or vice versa. They are just two different ways to relate to each other. And there's nothing wrong with you for falling more into one camp than the other. People are just sometimes wired differently. The point is not to see if you can tolerate a particular dynamic, suffer in silence because maybe your partner wants you to. The point is to find out what is right for you personally. What works for you? Which dynamics allow you to feel the most whole, complete, and present in your life? Regardless of whether we are personally inclined towards polyamory or monogamy, the relationship has to work for everyone involved or it isn't going to be sustainable or healthy. That being said, it can be absolutely worth it to spend some time exploring the idea of polyamory. Spending time with polyamory can be useful regardless of where we ultimately land. Most of us have been raised with monogamy. We understand it, we're familiar with it, most of us have experienced it. Monogamy is deeply culturally ingrained as not only the best choice, but really the only ethical choice. Most of us land in the monogamy mindset by default. Part of what I love about this exploration is it makes us reevaluate our expectations and understandings of relationships and the world in general. Polyamory requires us to look inward, to figure out what is actually important to us, rather than accepting someone else's narrative of how a relationship is supposed to look. We have to write that story ourselves. Whether you ultimately decide to be poly or monogamous, you will know more about yourself, what you want, and how you want to exist in the world. Your choices will not be the default. Your choices will be your choices. And you might be surprised by how joyful, authentic, and freeing polyamorous relationships can be. Or not. Either way, it's never a bad thing to be informed. Let's get into some of the philosophies of polyamory. Now, this may feel counterintuitive, but polyamory isn't actually any more risky than monogamy. But monogamy can give us a format, a generally understood structure that can make us feel safe. It tells us how to behave, what to do, how to keep things in line so we hopefully don't end up alone. So the standard relationship narrative goes something like this. We find a great person, someone we can imagine building a life with, and then we do whatever we can to get ourselves into the capital R relationship box. We will twist and contort ourselves in order to get in that box and stay there. Sometimes it can feel like the box, the relationship, is more important than the individuals in the box. If someone grows or changes, then the box is potentially in danger, and we have to exert control over each other so that the box is protected. By society standards, in many ways, the relationship is considered a success so long as the box stays intact until somebody dies. It doesn't really work, though. If people want to leave or be hurtful or neglectful or abusive or absent, that is what they'll do. People do all sorts of crazy things in the box. They leave, they cheat, they burn the damn things down, or they contort themselves and make themselves smaller and sadder and emptier. And they stay in terrible relationships for years, sometimes their whole lives, suffering because that's what they think love means. The box doesn't actually protect us from loss or betrayal. In reality, regardless of whether we are monogamous or poly, healthy consensual romantic partnerships are based on choice. The mutual decision to grow together, to share a life, to connect and be present. That is it. That's what holds a partnership together, not some predetermined, preordained structure society decided was acceptable. But it can feel scarier because the comforting illusion of the box is gone. The arbitrary set of rules and expectations we've been taught are shown to be just that, arbitrary. So we have to acknowledge the risk. Trying to exert control over others doesn't make us safe. There is no way to fully protect ourselves from heartbreak. We are vulnerable, which is scary and beautiful and true, again, regardless of which camp we land in. So rather than finding a potential partner and contorting ourselves to match, I want to offer a different model. What I would prefer to see is people coming to each other from as centered a place of self as possible. Of course, we learn and grow and change over time, but we want to understand ourselves as well as we can with the information we have at the time. So we come to each other and we say, here's who I am and what I'm looking for and what I have to offer. And we kind of see where the Venn diagram overlaps. Now, sometimes I'm a visual person. I imagine that overlap like a three-dimensional thing, like a crystal kind of. So maybe at first glance, it doesn't look like there's enough overlap to make things work. But maybe if we take that overlapping section and look at it from a different angle, we find places where we do overlap. In this way, no one has to contort or betray themselves for the other. We show up with our whole selves and we find the places where we connect honestly and wholeheartedly. The goal is not to mold a person into the shape we want them to be. It's not to change ourselves to make someone else feel happy. It's about each person feeling whole, complete, and present with the other. Sometimes folks think that polyamory suggests that people are replaceable. Like there's one slot for romantic partner and you can just take one out and put the other one in. They feel like polyamory makes them less important and less special. I think it's the opposite. Polyamory recognizes that people are absolutely unique and irreplaceable. Just like having multiple friends. Having one friend doesn't diminish the value of the other. My love for my partners isn't interchangeable. They are so different. My feelings for them are based on who they are, not because they fill a particular role in my life, but because they are so uniquely lovely and important. Polyamory allows me to revel in those different relationships instead of feeling like the existence of one could possibly diminish the value of the other. Each relationship is different. The people are different, the circumstances, the history, the way we connect with each other as individuals. There's no need for competition because love, affection, friendship, connection, these are not finite resources. And we pretty much all know that generally. We know that we are able to love our friends deeply, that we can have multiple children and absolutely adore each of them. We know that loving one person doesn't reduce our capacity to love another. It just feels different when you add romance to the equation. But it doesn't have to. Rather than making people replaceable, polyamory allows us to fully embrace and love each other for who we actually are. With monogamy, often, we're kind of trying to find or create the one person that will meet all of our needs, that matches us in all the ways pretty much all of the time. When we need our partners to fill a particular role or shape, it becomes harder to appreciate them for who they actually are. When you need one person to be all things, the places where we diverge can become breaking points. They don't have to be, though. Polyamory makes space for non-standard pairings. Introverts and extroverts, differing sex drives, mismatches in general availability or temperament. Polyamory allows us to celebrate the places where we do meet. For example, I am very much in love and lust with an absolutely gorgeous gray asexual person. That means they really like making out sometimes, but sex isn't really something they're generally interested in. I am personally a very sexually motivated person. Within the monogamy narrative, we would not be a good match. Our drives are too different. They might feel pressured or insufficient. I might feel frustrated or rejected. People in these kinds of dynamics can really wound each other terribly. Instead, polyamory gives us the space to truly celebrate our whole selves. We accept each other fully, and neither of us has to contort ourselves to make the other happy. Our boundaries are respected and validated, and we are free to find our joy with each other in the ways that we do fit. To me, the basis of polyamory is not just about getting to date multiple people. That's just a side effect, in a way. In fact, I know poly people that rarely date more than one or two people because that's what they have the capacity for. Instead, polyamory is really a fundamental philosophical shift that emphasizes autonomy, authenticity, and personal ownership. And sometimes that comes with multiple partners and exciting sexcapades, and sometimes it means introvert time and personal exploration, deep platonic connection, self-reflection, therapy, and working through our own fears and traumas. Actually, honestly, there tends to be a lot of that last bit. That's a big part of the beauty of polyamory. Taking ownership of our lives, our mental health, the roles we play in our relationships, creating healthy interdependence rather than codependence. For me, autonomy and authenticity and self-ownership are vital to my sense of self. The idea of another person telling me what I'm allowed to do with my heart or my body feels kind of offensive, actually. The idea of having to police, monitor, or control the actions of another adult sounds awful. Ultimately, whether we are poly or mono, we show up for our partners because we want to. We should be reliable and consistent and treat our partners with respect and care. We need to honor our commitments if we want our relationships to thrive. We have to behave with compassion and integrity, not because the box tells us to, but because that is who we are, who we want to be, and we should expect the same from our partners. We need to each be responsible for ourselves without having to look over each other's shoulders to make sure we're doing it right. And that is the beauty of polyamory. Again, we have to make good choices, not because the box tells us to, but because it's our personal responsibility. Now, let's say all this resonates with you and it sounds like something you might want in your life. Know this: as beautiful as polyamory can be, even in the best of circumstances, the transition period can be rough. I think the most important thing for people to know going into this process is that it is okay if things feel hard. They are likely going to. It doesn't mean it will always be stressful, but the learning curve can be challenging. Sometimes, even when everyone is enthusiastically on board, folks can panic. It's actually really normal. Every movie, every song, all of our cultural mythology is based on monogamy. We have been taught since birth a relationship model based on scarcity and competition. If our partner desires someone else, they don't love us. If someone desires our partner, they are the enemy. If we desire someone other than our partner, we are bad people and should be ashamed of ourselves. Even when we philosophically know better, our cultural training runs deep, and it can affect us in ways that we are not prepared for. It is important that couples develop the skill sets and practices that encourage open, honest, vulnerable communication and mutual support, even when things are feeling scary. This means being able to hear and make space for our loved ones' fears and sorrows while not becoming hostile or reactive or shutting down or being overwhelmed by guilt or defensiveness. It also means being able to express those fears and sorrows in ways that are not an attack. We need to be able to communicate and be heard without making our partners into a target for our unhappiness. We want to cultivate a dynamic of mutual caring and support, as well as personal ownership of our flaws and mistakes. It is a delicate balance, and it takes time to learn. Nobody has to be perfect, but we all do need to be trying to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, and we need to be willing to learn as we go. Sitting with and supporting each other through discomfort is a vital skill set, and it takes practice. Try to meet each other with patience, love, and respect, and don't panic when things get hard. I'm going to shift gears here and focus on some practical nitty-gritty advice to help couples transition to polyamory in a way that feels sustainable and loving. First, each of you should spend some time alone thinking about what is important to you, particularly to you, in life, in romance in general, and in your partnerships. What feels meaningful, what feels problematic, what you want and need in your life, what feels good to you and what feels restrictive or hurtful. The reason I suggest doing some of this work alone is because I want you to know yourself. You need to know who you are, what your needs and boundaries are, and how you feel. Not what you think your partner wants you to feel, but what you actually feel. That way you can come to this conversation from as centered a place of self as possible. Of course, we change, we grow, it's good to be flexible, but we want to be as honest and self-aware as we can be with the information that we have at the time. Then, talk to each other. There's going to be a lot of this. I like to think of relationships as a cooperative work of art. We are building something beautiful and we want to collaborate in that process. We want to do that with intention and active participation. Talk about what is beautiful in your partnership. What things do you want to nurture and grow? What things should change and shift? On a practical level, how much time and energy does this partnership need to thrive? What do you want this relationship to look like going forward? Being on the same page about what you're building together is important. It's important also to be honest with yourself and your partner. Maybe there are things in your partnership that are not working for you. Things that feel so ingrained that they feel inseparable to the partnership. We have to have those difficult conversations, even though that can be intimidating. Try to approach each other with curiosity and mutual respect. The point isn't to lock down the relationship so that nothing changes. The point is to create something vital and living that works for you both. Be patient with each other, strategize, figure out where your vulnerable spots are so that you can work together to become stronger. Don't panic if the conversations are challenging. They're just going to be. I can't cover all of this here, but there are tools and systems that make the process easier. The most important part is to approach each other lovingly, respectfully, and from as centered a place of self as you can. Also, I want to say, remember, common sense isn't. There are all kinds of reasons why two people who love each other, are considerate of each other, and who tend to come to the same conclusions about things might end up behaving in ways that the other person cannot understand. And sometimes we don't know if that something is going to bother us until it comes up. You and your partner can have a million conversations. You may think you have discussed every possible thing that could possibly come up, and I promise you, you haven't. Moments of conflict are not necessarily a bad thing. They are opportunities for growth and refinement. When a new thing comes up that causes conflict, it is best if all people involved can approach the topic like a puzzle to be worked out, not an attack or a failure. So talking is important. It can also be useful to compartmentalize those conversations. At this stage of the game, it is really common for folks to end up talking almost exclusively about polyamory. Remember that your partnership is bigger than polyamory. Ideally, once the dust has settled, poly is just going to be one color in a much larger tapestry of your relationship. It's part of your life, but it's not your defining characteristic. Don't let your relationship narrow down to just potentially stressful conversations about polyamory. Spend time talking about the things that bring you together, the things you love about each other. Set aside time to talk about the stressful stuff. You can't just avoid that part. You'll have to work together to figure out an acceptable frequency. If there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, a lot of change happening, you may need to talk about it more often. Just make sure there is time and space for the rest of your relationship too. On a related note, and this is true for mono and poly couples alike, no matter how long we've been together or how comfortable we are with each other, we need to continue to put effort and intention into wooing one another, courting each other, always. Cultivate a relationship dynamic of active appreciation and presence. Don't get so distracted by the possibility of the new that you lose track of the deep, beautiful richness of your long-term loving partnerships. Healthy, sustainable relationships require us to continue to show up for each other, to keep learning about each other, to celebrate one another. No matter what your relationship dynamic is, no matter how long you've been together, continue to treat each other with love and focus. Spend time together, date, put effort into being present and aware of who our partners are now, who they actually are, not who they were or how we imagine them to be. We need to continue getting to know each other. Even when we've been together for decades, we need to keep in mind that we are all continuously growing and shifting, and we want to be present for that. We want to lean into the unique and special connections we have in our lives. Next, no surprises. Spontaneity is really difficult once there are multiple people involved, and surprises can send folks into an almost primal panic. Transitioning to polyamory can be incredibly destabilizing at first. It can be hard to know where the ground is, hard to feel safe. Knowing that nothing is going to jump up and hurt us is important. We need to feel safe, and part of that comes from knowing that we're not going to be emotionally ambushed by something we're not prepared for. Give each other time and space to process what's coming down the pipeline. For a lot of people, they want to know ahead of time if there are going to be dates coming in, dates coming up, if there are new people, new challenges, new dynamics to adapt to. What that time frame might look like depends on the people involved and their particular circumstances. It is a negotiation. We want to balance independence and autonomy with loving, present partnership. We do not want our partners to feel constantly on edge, waiting for the next thing to pop out of the shadows. Also, treat people like they matter. Whether the person is a one-night stand, a long-term partner, or the cashier at the grocery store, treat them like real people, with respect and consideration. If you are dating someone, be honest about who you are, what you're available for, and what your limitations are. People are not disposable. We can't manipulate them to get what we want. They are not NPCs or tools or toys meant to meet your needs. Be respectful. Honor your commitments. Be honest. Be kind. Show up when you say you will. Try not to offer more than you can actually give. Understand that everyone you interact with is a real, live, breathing, feeling, thinking person, and treat them accordingly. And remember, your needs and well-being are important too. Okay, there's so much more to talk about here, but I am actually trying to keep this video a little bit short. The last thing I will recommend here is to find and build a support network. Whether it's loving and understanding friends and family, therapists, other poly folks, or relationship coaches, having people to talk to makes a huge difference. A lot of people don't have access to a ton of good information, role models, or examples of how things are supposed to work, so they end up kind of flying in the dark. Things can get a lot harder than they really need to be. There are a lot of resources available online and in books and podcasts in your local poly community. You can also find out more about me and the work I do at polycoach.org, and I also encourage you to follow me on YouTube for more helpful videos on sexuality, kink, boundaries, consent, and of course, polyamory. And finally, if you would like to have personal support through this process, regardless of where you are in the journey, I invite you to schedule a free introductory coaching session with me. You don't have to try to figure out all of this on your own. There are absolutely ways to make this path healthier, safer, and more sustainable and joyful. Please reach out if I can be of service. And remember, struggling does not mean that you are bad at poly, or that poly can't work, or that your relationship is doomed. It just means you are human. You are creating something beautiful and unique and innately challenging, often without a roadmap. Of course, that's going to be hard sometimes. But for those that feel the pull to polyamory, it is absolutely worth the effort. There is so much good to be found here, so much love, connection, joy, and growth. Okay, for real, I'm going to make myself stop now because there is so much more I want to talk about, but then the video will end up being way too long. So goodbye for now. I'm looking forward to talking with you again soon.